All right, this is our first of our review sessions for the certification test. The first thing I want to go over are some of the things that you may find on the Review tab. Right here is where you can add comments and delete comments and do a lot of different things. Actually, one of the things I want you to see is once you add a comment in there, you just click on New Comment button. You can type whatever you want and then click back over your document and continue to go on. But you can have comments from multiple people. And by the way, if you want to select a comment, if you just go previous or next, it'll actually select the comment, and then you can choose to use from the delete options if they ask you to delete them, which you can also choose to delete all the comments in the document if you want. But back to where I was, one of the things they do is they ask you to show only certain people's comments. And if you go up here where it says show markup, that's any of the changes that have been made while using the reviewing features. You can go down to where it says reviewers, and there's where you can set it up to pick out which reviewer you want to see and only that reviewer. The other thing that I want you to see in here is this is also where you can restrict editing if they ask you to put a restriction on this so that somebody can only change this by working with the comments. If you go under restrict editing, all right, you can choose from some of the options down here, but one of the ones that they normally talk about is going in and setting this up so that you can either set it up as read only or you can use it just for like comments. And they may ask you not to worry about a password, and that just means that when you do it, you don't worry about it. If it asks for a password, you just hit OK and don't put any password in. Just don't forget to go down and actually start enforcing that restriction. Back to where we were, that is the majority of what you're normally going to see in here. They will occasionally have you compare two documents. They'll have two very similar documents, and what they'll ask you to do is compare one to another, and you just use your compare button. This is another thing on review, and go find the two documents. All right, and they'll tell you whether they want you to combine them or just use straight compare, and you can just go from there. The other thing I want to talk about while we're here is I'd like to talk about some of the features that you may be asked to use from the options panel. And if you go to File and go down to where it says Options, this will pop up. And there are several things here I want you to see. One of them is the fact that they may ask you to change the username for this, who the actual user is that's doing the editing for the document, and this is where you would go to do that. Other options that you might see under proofing, we have our autocorrect options, and autocorrect does several things. This is where you can tell it to stop doing autocorrect. If you just go in here and take off these check marks, you can also put an exception in there where you don't want something to be auto-corrected. You just click where it says all other corrections, type in whatever it is and add it, and then that will no longer be corrected. You can also have some auto format as you type options in here, things like setting the indents, automatically creating bulleted lists, things like that. So if they ask you to stop formatting something as you type to automatically formatting, this is where you would go to do that. Also, while we're here, this is where you can work on your spell checker. You can create a custom dictionary, or you can just basically choose which dictionary you want. The other thing is down here, we have our spell checker that's running constantly, and maybe I don't want to see all my green lines or my red lines, and so you can take the check mark off where it says check spelling as you type or check grammar. Another thing I want you to see is under save. You may not realize it, but in the background Word is saving a recovery file for you every so often, and you can go in here and tell it where that file is going to be saved to. You just use your browse button and go pick out a folder. The other thing you can do is you can change the default location where things are going to be saved. While we're over there using that file option, if I go under File, I can also go in here and set this thing up Right now it's a read-only document. If I click Save As, I can change it to a different name and take that read-only off. Here are options for permissions that you can go in and work with here also. And one of the other things I want you to see is go down to where it says Save and Send, and here's where you can choose what type of file type this is going to be. And this is probably the safest place to go do this when they ask you to use a different file type, change it to something else. The only thing that you wouldn't use for this is if you're going to save it as a template, and if you're going to do that, you simply go into the Save As dialog box, and then down here at the bottom change this to a Word template, and then you can save it as a template. I want to hit on a couple more things while we're here. There are two different types of spacing that you might deal with. One is character spacing. If you're talking about character spacing, all right, that is a font attribute or a character attribute, and the way you do that is getting in the font dialog box. When this opens up, you can go over to the Advanced tab, and here's your spacing, and maybe I might change that to condensed in this case, and it's going to pull the text a little bit closer. Okay. But while we're here, let's go click on the Font tab. You also have three different effects that you might see, and actually they may even throw in like superscript or subscript or strike through. These are all effects that they may ask you to apply, and then when I hit OK, it kind of shrank that up. That was line spacing, or excuse me, character spacing. The other thing I might do is line spacing, and line spacing is a paragraph option. So I can go down to where it says line spacing, and I can change that to something a little bit different. Maybe I would set that for at least so much, or for exactly a certain amount. The other thing you might do is they might have you change a first line indent on that paragraph. And from what I've found in the past, they always give you a number that is very hard to change just by using the ruler. So you might need to come in here and maybe change it to 0.7 or 0.8 or something like that. While we're here, don't forget that you can always change tabs by clicking on the tabs button here in the bottom left. And if you go under line spacing, you can go in here and use some of these options. You have keep with next, and that means that that paragraph will always appear with the paragraph after it. They'll never get separated. Or keep lines together. In this case, a paragraph will never get pulled apart, so part of it is on one page and part of it's on the next. So when I hit OK, that automatically takes this over to the next page. Since we're sitting here working on a document that has information for a report, we're going to go down to the third page. Now click down here, because here is where you can also go back under your references and you can apply one of two different things. They're usually going to either have you add a bibliography, and pay attention to what they say. If they say pre-formatted or pre-designed or pre-styled or something like that, they want you to use one of these two options right here. If they start talking about inserting a bibliography but don't change any of the other default settings, then that means you're going to go open up your dialog box, or excuse me, scratch that. That's where you're putting it in with no formatting at all. What we have not used, though, is a table of contents, which they may ask you to do. And again, this is one where you may need to get into the dialog box, because here you can choose different templates or different styles. So they may tell you to choose like a classic style or something like that. And you can also change what levels you have. And then I just hit OK and throws that in there.